and Birth podcast. I'm Jamie Raisleger, doula, childbirth educator, and mom of 3, including twin babies. Join us as we explore the transformative power of healing through childbirth, delve into the options, receive guest expert wisdom, and hear inspiring stories that pave the way for healing and wholeness throughout pregnancy, birth, and beyond. In a culture where birth is often viewed with fear, we aim to shift the narrative by showcasing pregnancy and birth as opportunities for personal growth, enhanced experiences, and generational healing. Whether the journey is smooth sailing or filled with unexpected challenges, this podcast offers a supportive space for birth workers and everyone navigating their profound realities in the childbearing season of life. Tune in and embark on a journey toward empowerment, resilience, and triumph. Your babies will thank you. Hello, welcome to another episode of the Triumphant Birth podcast. I wanted to pop in really quickly here just to give a little disclaimer because today's episode is focused around postpartum depression, anxiety, rage, OCD, psychosis, all of those things that can be tough conversations. And so I am so honored to have Cynthia here today talking through her experience of specifically postpartum depression and postpartum rage. So in an effort to make sure that nobody feels alone in their experience if they are going through something similar, we do get vulnerable and very specific about things like intrusive thoughts, scary thoughts, and what really was going on for her during that time. I did not want to shy away from that reality. However, I do understand that there may be people listening who may not be in the space to be able to hear those details, which do get a little bit graphic. So it may be wise, use your own discernment, but it may be wise to listen to a different episode if that is true for you, and to come back to this one later. So with that said, I also wanted to highlight the primary resource that we talk about in the episode, and that is Postpartum Support International. So we do go through this resource in more detail in the later half of the episode and the last half of the episode, but I wanted to outline it at the front as well in case somebody is just needing support immediately. So Postpartum Support International, or PSI, is a global nonprofit organization that's dedicated to helping individuals and families who are affected by these perinatal mental health conditions. They offer support, resources, and education for people who are experiencing these perinatal mood and anxiety disorders, including postpartum depression. PSI also provides training for professionals and advocates for better care and policies related to perinatal mental health. I also wanted to mention, as really such a great resource related to Postpartum Support International, is their helpline. So they do have a 1-800 number. And if anyone is in need of immediate support that is specific to perinatal mental health, their phone number is 1-800-944-4773. And you can press number 1 for Spanish or number 2 for English. And then they also have text support available via that 1-800 number. So you can text the word HELP, HELP, to that same number in English, 1-800-944-4773. And if you would like texting support in Spanish, you can text the word HELP to 971-203-7773. So with all of that said, I hope you enjoy the episode with Cynthia. I am super excited today to have my friend Cynthia Dortch on, and she is going to share a birth story or 2 or 3 briefly, and also talk about experiences that she's had postpartum and how it has shaped her work, the way she planned for future births. And so I'm just really excited and honored to have her on today. And I'm doing the thing again where I say her and you're right in front of me, like you're not even there. So welcome, Cynthia, to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
So, why don't we start by just talking a little bit about who you are and what brought you into birth work in the first place?
Yeah, I feel like that's a story on its own. Well, I'm a mother to 3 daughters who are now all teenagers and preteens. Um, I started my birth journey in California, Southern California, due to being a military spouse. My experiences with birth on my own is ranging from unmedicated to epidurals to hospital births, military hospital births, and birth center births. And that led me into doula work and supporting the majority of a lot towards military families, especially those with deployed spouses. And moving to good old Wisconsin, I was able to work with the doula agency and work with families here in Wisconsin. Yeah, now I just do doula work and childbirth educator and try to support families as much as possible.
That's amazing, and you're very humble because you are such an asset to this community. And I know Cynthia personally, if I didn't mention that already. So I'm very excited to have her here to talk with. And it's been a really good thing to have you in this community as a resource and as someone who has been through a few things, because that's really important when we're supporting women and families. So I
Yeah.
think we said that you were going to focus more on your second birth. Is
Mhm.
that right? Out of the three. So you have three girls.
Mhm.
And do you want to touch on your first birth just very briefly for context before you start with the birth story of Desiree?
Yeah. So with Isabella, I was a teen mom. So I got pregnant at 17 and I had her when I was 18. Um, in a military hospital in Camp Pendleton. And it very much is a military hospital where male doctors, male nurses, it was a teaching hospital. So I very much had many people in my room. I did not have a lot of education or knowledge. I took, the hospital childbirth classes, and it very much taught you now that I know how to be a patient and how to get epidurals. And that was basically it. So after her birth, I knew that something needed to be different, but I really wasn't sure what that was. I wasn't sure why I felt disappointed with the birth. I wasn't didn't really understand why I struggled with breastfeeding or why it didn't last so long or why I had, you know, some postpartum anxiety and depression with Isabella as well, but I still really didn't understand those things, especially at 18,
Yeah,
without having a good support system.
right. And a lot of people still, I mean, even at whatever age they're having babies in their 20s, 30s, whatever it is, so many people still don't understand that.
Yeah.
So, I'm looking forward to diving a little deeper into that piece with you, but I'll let you continue here.
Yeah. With Desiree's birth, I had back labor. And if you you know how bad back labor can be. I don't think I was prepared for that. It was something that took me very by surprise on how intense having back labor was
Yeah.
and not
So,
knowing
sorry to interrupt you. So, just for context, so you were 18
when I
with
had
your
Bella.
first birth, and then
Yep.
how far in between the
They're
the first and
16
second
months
births?
apart. So I was 20.
Okay.
Yep, but that's right. All normal pregnancies and didn't have any issues. There was nothing, it was all perfect pregnancy. I think the difference is I knew that we were impending deployment.
Mhm.
And during this time, there was activity in other countries. So it was very heavy on our hearts that he would be deploying and it would be, a 6 to 7 month deployment. He just wasn't sure when. Was he going to be here for the birth? Was he not going to be here for the birth? What did that kind of look like? And leading up to her birth, it's still a little fuzzy. I did go into labor naturally, and that's kinda where I mentioned, like, the back labor took me completely by surprise. I was
Yeah.
not prepared for that sensation of, feeling like your back was just on fire and being, like, torn apart. So, there was not a lot of support in that aspect. I do remember being in the triage room and not being dilated enough for them, so having to labor on this little bed, and, I'm definitely a puker when it comes to labor, so I remember just puking my guts up and being checked again and told that I can finally move into the hospital room because I was already, I think 6 or 7 centimeters at that point.
Mhm.
Um, and this is where it gets a little fuzzy and why I think it dictated a lot of my postpartum,
Yeah.
um, where I remember getting into the hospital room and asking if I wanted an epidural, and I said I wasn't sure, but I needed something at that moment to kinda help and reground myself a little bit, and, um, after that, it is very, like, touch and go as fuzziness, like, I don't remember a lot.
And
Um,
who was with you at this point?
my husband was with me at
He
that point.
was, okay.
Mhm, yep. I remember being hooked up to monitors, and I remember, being told I was giving pain medication via IV, and, I later found out that it was Demerol, and I remember laying down in bed, and I then remember waking up, which was several hours later, and feeling pressure in my hips. At some point, I got an epidural. I don't remember. I don't remember sitting up for it. I don't remember getting the epidural. I don't remember anything other than being asleep. My husband had shared in the past of that I was just completely drugged, that I just crashed. I was out, I was asleep, um, that I was very loopy, and which I didn't really understand until reading my hospital notes that it was because I had the Demerol. And I've never had hard medication before, so that really really knocked me out. So I remember feeling pressure in my pelvis and my hips, and um them checking me, and sure enough I was ready to start pushing at that point, but I think I was so like just completely out of it, and like waking up that way, really I was not ready for birth. I was not ready to meet her. It felt very out of my body, and even like talking through it, sometimes it still feels like I'm looking at myself down. And I don't remember pushing. I don't remember any of that aspect of it. I do remember them trying to put her on my chest, and I said no. I think I just needed time to come into my body. But that aspect, I feel like I will always regret a little bit not having her immediately go to my chest. So it took me a minute, and after they cleaned her up and, I heard her cry and things like that, did they finally bring her over to me, and I asked for her. But then it was just kind of a whirlwind. So I think it just took a little bit to not even process, but just be like, "Okay, I have a baby now, and I don't know what that means." It was just kind of very much a whirlwind going from that back labor and then to have this huge gap of just not really knowing what happened. Did they check me when I was out of it? Did they not? Did who was in my room? Who was the provider? Was there any conversations? What type of consent happened? I think a lot of that I kind of just blacked out about. And I think Robert did the same because when we look back at her birth, it's really hard to navigate a timeline of things and details. It's very like, yeah, we got there, this happened, you were out of it, and then we had a baby. There's not a lot that we can kind of pick through, which is hard.
Yeah, that's a loss in and of itself, and it's something to grieve in and
Mhm.
of itself. And it reminds me of, we hear a lot of stories, and it almost reminds me of these stories where C-section moms go in and either it's general anesthesia or it's where they get the IV meds and um, can't really remember a lot, or they are loopy, and it's that same type of thing. And it is definitely something to grieve, and
Mhm.
it's a loss. The other thing that you said was, it's interesting because you said you kind of regretted that moment where she wasn't on your chest right away. You kind of said not yet. Um, and I can see that for sure because even in unmedicated births, like completely unmedicated births, it's really normal to need that moment to just like take a deep breath because you've done this big thing and to, like you said, come back into your body
Yeah.
and to be ready. And you weren't even ready. It didn't sound like you weren't even ready to push her out, much less receive your baby. So
Mhm.
I have so much like compassion and so much like I understand that so much even
Mhm.
without any medication. And then when you're in a state where you're not feeling grounded because you have this other thing layered in, that has to be so hard. So I definitely understand how that can be rough. And I talk through it like that because I'm hoping that if other moms hear this, that they know that it's okay to take a minute for
Yeah.
themselves, right after. And
Yeah.
you're allowed obviously to feel however you want about it, but it's really normal to need a minute before you receive your baby.
Mhm. Yeah. I think there are so many factors there. Um, and I always go back to maybe too much knowledge sometimes now, where I'm at in my life kind of
For
dictates
sure.
why I feel the way that I feel. I'm like, oh, that could have been detrimental and why I have X, Y, and Z. And so I think if I didn't know what I didn't know, I don't think I would hold so much guilt of not having her straight on my chest. I
Yeah.
think I would be like, I just needed to be grounded and I needed a minute to breathe. But there were so many factors in it. So on top of that, she apparently aspirated some meconium. So we spent a lot of time at the NICU there. We spent about 5 days there. And then Robert ended up deploying just a few days later.
Wow.
Um, so we went from very quick birth to, which, yeah, that was a very quick birth when you look at the timeline. And then a little bit of a NICU stay, and then to him deploying. And um, no matter what, no one really prepares you for that. Like, they have the meetings and people talk about it, and yes, you have the veteran wives that are, give you advice and talk you through it, but I don't think no one ever is prepared enough as a young wife with a new baby and a toddler, to say goodbye to their spouse and see you later in 6 to 7 months.
Yeah.
You know? And so it's funny how our mind protects us as much as possible and why things are fuzzy the way they need to be. um, but those first couple weeks are definitely very fuzzy, and there's like little highlights that I remember of and please stop me if you have questions or you want me to reiterate
Yeah.
some things,
Sure.
but he left, and then I'm trying to think. I had a friend that, wanted to be there and support me. It ended up being really awkward for me because I kind of just wanted to wallow in pity and not have anybody in my space. But I ended up sending her home the next day and I was like, thanks, but I just kind of need to focus on this little newborn now. And I think I was so devastated by the birth and still had a lot of questions,
Yeah.
um, and devastated that he was gone and we couldn't talk and text and, we just emailed back and forth, um, that it was very it was very damaging to postpartum.
Yeah. So did you have any family around or any other support other than the one friend? Because I mean, really your main support had just been taken from you. And
Right.
I say that, and there's also a difference, because some people would be like, well, why didn't you accept the help, from the friend or whatever? But in when you're in that time frame, your brain as a mother switches to being protective and needing to feel comfortable with what's happening. So there's a big difference between accepting support and accepting support that is actually helpful and helps your system to like down regulate, meaning just uh, switching into that state where you feel more calm and relaxed and actually restful versus going to the other side where, oh, there's somebody new here, it's not the same, and maybe switching to a more hyper vigilant side. So there's a big difference there. And I totally understand why, why if it wasn't feeling right to you for
Yeah.
whatever reason that you would say, okay, I got it. See you
Yeah.
later. Was there anybody else at all that you could lean on while Robert was deployed?
I think being I think a lot more military spouses would understand the fact that, it's really hard to get out there and socialize, um, especially being a teen mom and, a younger mom with multiple kids and, not really understanding the resources that are there. It's very easy to get in a little bubble. Um, Plus, this is a state that I had never been to. All my family was in Colorado and all his family was in Oregon. So, majority of them were saving up their travel time for when he did get back from deployment. So it wasn't not more important, but it was important to them to be able to like, if we come visit, we also want to be able to see Robert. And I think it's important to notate that when someone's deep into it, we don't know how to ask for help. Like, there's never anything in the back of your mind that's saying you need to, like, get help. I feel like until you're really either having a clarity moment and, like, looking in from out and can really take a second to see how either bad something is or how you're really doing, until you're out of that fog, which really leads to how I support clients postpartum right now. But I feel like during that time, there was nothing on my mind that said, you need to call for help. You need to call and tell them how bad it is. You need to, I think because I had this responsibility to hold down the family while he was gone and that I needed to be strong and not cause issues or make him feel, like things were going wrong at home so that way he could focus on his mission, which was really important. But in the other side of it, and I'll always say this, I feel like the military really fails you as a spouse when our spouses do leave and, doesn't really set you up for success in a spouse being gone, especially if you know that your, service member's wife just had a baby and doesn't have family in the area, then what should you guys be doing at that point? Like how should you be checking in and whose responsibility is that? And to what extent? And I can go on a rabbit hole on that one. But I think as I'm talking through it, I think there's still this unknown of whose responsibility was that? And was it mine? Was it family? Was it others? And is that me placing blame to kind of be like validating that I needed help? or, yeah, I'm not sure. That's
Yeah.
interesting.
It is interesting. It's an interesting conversation because even in households where you have 2 partners that are available, taking the military component out of it, people fall through the gaps, fall through the cracks all the time, and you've seen this. So
Mm,
it's like that whole aspect compounded by the fact that your partner is not there. I
yeah,
I have to think that, that does something so intense to our brains who, our brains want to protect our families. And if we don't physically or mentally or logistically have the resources to do that. I mean, we're not meant to do it in isolation, period.
yeah,
It's when you go through and process those things, it's your brain trying to figure out where the blame falls or like how we can avoid this the next time. And our brains ruminate over this because it is something that nobody should have to go through. So I did have one other question. So looking back now, like you mentioned, you didn't really know how bad it was until after the fact. And
mhm,
I hear that a lot too with people who have postpartum depression, anxiety. I guess that's a whole nother question too, because a lot of people I see in the general public kind of group everything together into the postpartum depression like basket. And I know that you are very well versed in the differences between what can actually happen in the
mm,
postpartum time frame. So we know that there's postpartum depression, postpartum anxiety, postpartum rage, postpartum OCD, postpartum psychosis. Am
mhm.
I missing one there?
No.
And it can be a combination of all of those. So what was it like for you?
Um, I feel like I did not experience any anxiety. There wasn't any any of the anxiety around it. I think that postpartum depression hit very, very early on. Like that right after that first to 7 days postpartum. I
Sure.
feel like it's this black hole of I remember someone knocking on my door one day to deliver something and I walked out of my room and I will never forget. I There was no floor to walk on. There was toys everywhere, there was trash, there was blankets and towels and cups and toddler cups and plates, and there was nowhere for I was walking over things, and I remember walking to my door and like, "What is happening? Why is my floor like this?" And I think that was a moment where I was, like, really deep into it, and there was a little bit of consciousness in the back of my head of, "This isn't normal, but I'm surviving right now, and it's fine." I definitely spent a lot of nights where it was a lot of crying. It's hard because there's a lot of holes still in those early weeks. Like, there's a lot of I don't remembers. And again, I talk about how beautiful the mind is and how it protects you from that. And I also feel like there was some postpartum rage towards the kids as well, because Bella was only 16, 17 months at this point
Mhm.
and a toddler and running around. And I'm really glad that she was as independent as she was because she just kind of did her own thing. But um, I think being so touched out from a newborn and breastfeeding and all of that, it was very much like, don't make a noise when your sister's sleeping and don't wake them up. And no one tells you how tired you are going from one to two. It's the hardest transition that I think moms go through is that one to two. It's a whole new level of guilt and level of transition that you can't sugarcoat it because I rather people plan for the worst and then be surprised about how easy that was.
Sure.
Than feel like, man, I was not prepared for
Yeah.
that. I think the rage set in after sleep deprivation. I remember being so angry at my baby for not sleeping. And, of course, I say the mind is beautiful and it blocks out things, but it sure didn't block that out. 'Cause I very much remember being so mad of just like, "Why won't you go to sleep?
Yeah.
Just sleep."
That's where I was going to go next, is asking about sleep, because I'm sure your baby slept like a normal baby, which is waking up all the time in the
Yeah.
middle of the night. And for our listeners too, if you're not aware of this, like, even if you don't have a diagnosable postpartum mood disorder, if you're not getting a continuous stretch of like 4 hours for several days in a row, that can look like postpartum depression. And so I know you know this, I'm preaching to the choir here, but one thing that we always tell clients is that if you're feeling like ragey, if you're in this deep, dark place, the very first thing to do is try to get support around you so that you can get at least a 4-hour stretch of sleep 3 nights in a row, and then see what lifts, because a lot of times that's all it is, because
Mhm,
it looks exactly the same as postpartum depression and rage and all these other things.
mhm.
Um, and for you, though, you didn't really have a support system. So that is a really tough place to be in. And it's a very normal and natural survival mechanism for you to be feeling this way. And I think there's a whole conversation we could have at some point of like, is postpartum depression actually a normal response to not
Mhm.
having support? So
Yeah.
there can be so much guilt and shame with all of these things. And honestly, I do think that it's a normal reaction to not having support on some level. So looking back now with everything you know, because you have volunteered for Postpartum Support International, and this is a very important topic to you, obviously.
Mhm.
Looking back with everything you know now, what were the first signs that something maybe wasn't quite right? Were there signs looking back now where you're like, that's the first indication that something maybe was a little bit off?
Um, the isolation, I think I hold up in the house. It's so hard because a lot of it is Black. Okay, to lead up into that and some of the risk factors, I think, is important.
Mhm.
Risk factors for postpartum depression, one is just being a military spouse in general. There are studies that show that military spouses have a higher risk of depression, anxiety, and other mental health disorders. And so that, on top of having a deployed spouse, on top of having birth trauma, and on top of um, not having any support or sleep, and also a history of depression in general and anxiety, all risk factors leading up to this moment, I think. I think also on top of needing to be the sole provider for said two children. Um, is the other aspect. So there were a lot of tallies, I think, against me, my age as well, and I didn't know any of this though until like just a few years ago. That there were a lot of tallies. There's a lot of risk factors that people don't really look at or think of like, oh, what is my risk factor for this? Or, could this happen? Or, is it less likely to happen? Type of thing. But again,
Sure.
no one really talks about that. So
So how long were you in this state where it was so hard like this? And how, like, did you eventually get other support, or was it when Robert came home, or what did that all look like, sort of coming out of this state?
when I think about timeline, I think it was about 4 months.
Okay.
4 months in this um, hole. I don't remember leaving the house. I don't remember grocery shopping. I don't remember going to doctor's appointments. I don't remember taking Desiree to doctor's appointments. I don't remember me going to a 6-week doctor's appointment. I don't remember any of that happening. I remember the house being a mess. I remember the kitchen being wrecked. I remember, um, late night feedings. I remember the crying. I remember being so angry that she won't sleep. Um, I also remember painting a really pretty picture for Robert when I sent emails or videos and making it seem like things were cake and rainbows.
Yeah.
Because I didn't want him to worry. I think where I finally started getting some clarity was around, so Desiree was born in January, around April, mid-April. Um, I was driving somewhere and I remember very distinctly what street I was on. And driving with the girls, and Desiree's crying in the back and Bella's crying. And I remember if I just keep driving and I hit that wall in front of me, it'll be quiet. And but it won't be so bad. It'll be bad enough that Robert will have to come home. And sorry.
No, you take all the time you need. That is so scary.
And I think I had a few of those thoughts. Which is I think hard now, where I'm at in life and who I am as an educator and as a doula and as someone that supports moms, to not feel, I guess, shame or guilt, that was my journey. But it really dictated why I even came into this field and why I hone in on so many components for postpartum,
Mhm.
because it is very lonely and I feel like very taboo still to have a village right now and to have a support team and to have people without moms also feeling that shame or that guilt of having these thoughts. Um, and how normal intrusive thoughts are.
Yes. That's where I was going to go
Yeah.
next with that because it's like, just because you have these thoughts does not mean that you're going to act on them. And it is so common to have these
Mhm.
intrusive thoughts, and they increase the there's the less sleep that you get
Yeah.
typically. So it's something that is a function of the brain. And like you said, like we all probably have shame about that. And I went through it too after the birth of my first, and I had a support system. So I mean, I can only imagine like how severe it got for you with not having anybody there. Um, so it's that, yes, it is very common, and yes, it is something that you can reach out about and should reach out about. But at the same time, there's all these other thoughts of like, oh, I must be alone in this. Like, how would a normal person
Yes.
ever have these thoughts?
Yeah.
Because you can love your children and still have these thoughts.
Yeah.
So that was a turning point for you at that point, or how?
Um, at that point, no. I think it was just really almost, when you when I think about it, it almost felt like a plan. Like something drastic needs to happen for him to come home because I can't do this anymore. Like I just can't. There's no way I can keep surviving. And I think I was in this little Delulu land. And so what really knocked me out of it, um, was a few days later, I went and bought a dog. I went and got a 6-month-old German Shepherd, and her name was Daisy. Wow, Jamie. I feel like this needs to be your birth story medicine instead. um, and I think if I hadn't needed, because I lived in an apartment at the time, and I think that if I didn't have to like walk her every day and take her out and leave the house physically. And I had to go to the store and I had to buy things for her and I had to feed her, and which is so weird because I had to do the same thing for my children. But I think because I was so deep into it that um it was this newness of her that really flipped a switch. She brought joy into the house, and um it was very, very random that I just saw her like on a Facebook ad, and I remember emailing Robert and like, "Well, look what I got. Happy early birthday to me." And of course, he's like none the wiser. He has no idea that all these things are happening right now and in our lives, or that I'm in the state that I am, or um anything. It was just about a dog. And every night I'd go walking with her. Every day we would go walking to the dog parks. We would go to the park and do all the things, and she is what made me come out of this hole, because I think if I didn't have something, I don't even know.
Yeah.
I don't even know.
Yeah.
But I had to. She was this rambunctious German Shepherd, and um, we constantly were on the go after that. And I can remember a lot more after that, where I found a Mommy Me group and started going to that with the girls. And then I remember we went searching for different parks to travel to. And I remember grocery shopping, and I started working out and eating healthy, and I ended up losing like 40 pounds. Not anymore, but I did. I remember all these things, and I have photos from around that 4-month mark and on, but I don't have any before that.
Mm.
I maybe have the rare one or two um, when she was a newborn, but I have no photos of her or videos of us or of Bella in that first 4-month time period. It's all after, and Daisy's and all of it. It's just
Yeah.
not it. So,
Wow.
yeah.
I just want to commend you, first of all, for being so vulnerable and sharing all of that, because these are things that we don't even want to admit to ourselves,
Yeah.
much less get on a podcast and tell, whoever happens to listen to this. So I just want to thank you for being willing to share all of that and what was happening internally for you and in your home and in your mind and in your environment. And it is such a testament to the fact that we do the best that we can with the information and the resources we have at the time.
Yeah.
And you having the intuition or the knowledge that, like, hey, this dog is going to help me, that's so amazing. And she really did.
Yeah.
So it might be something else, for somebody else. I can definitely see though how that would be a catalyst for switching things up
Yeah.
and helping you to get that bilateral movement in the walking her that
Mhm.
we know affects our brain so positively. So I just have so much love for you and for the way that you're able to show up for yourself and how, just the whole story and the fact that you're sharing it so openly today. So thank you for that. So, okay, we can all take a deep breath.
You just have a way of bringing like mouth vomits from people. Oh my god.
So, you have 3 daughters. At what point did you say, "Okay, I'm back. I'm me"? How did that all look, getting pregnant with your third and going into it? What was different for either pregnancy or birth or the postpartum timeframe?
Yeah, I was a completely different person after that 4-month mark. But Robert ended up coming home from deployment when she was around 8 months old, and then we ended up moving again. We knew that we wanted children very close together. And so we waited, I want to say 2 years before we um, were like actively trying.
Mhm.
I was not on birth control at all, but it took us around 3 years to finally get pregnant because we were definitely open to it happening sooner. And after Desiree's birth is kind of when I started dabbling in what does birth need to be like? What is postpartum? It wasn't something I was serious about, but more just kind of looked at. And I actually was diagnosed with PCOS when I was trying to get pregnant with Liz. Not a lot of knowledge, not a lot of understanding of like how significant our hormones change after each birth, and that it could totally flip a script if it wanted, or also activate something in our genes or in our body, and that we didn't even know was there, which was now where I'm at is so enlightening to me of like working with other moms and what they're dealing with and how things are completely
Yeah.
normal and going fine. And then all of a sudden, after you have children, your hormones are so different and so out of
And
whack.
by the way, for our listeners, this woman that we're talking here to today, she's also a midwife.
Stop
Like,
it.
she's so humble. Like, you're a doula, you work with Postpartum International, you're a childbirth educator.
I gotta take the test still, so not officially licensed.
Mm, got it.
Gotta get
Okay.
licensed. But
So there's a lot of knowledge here.
yes, I think a lot came after Liz, where when we did get pregnant, I was more frustrated with the process because they like did the normal blood work and then they were like, here's Clomid and take this and you'll get pregnant. There was no like why or what is PCOS or anything like that. And like I took some time researching it, but funny enough, we ended up being pregnant that month, so I didn't even have to take it. And it was a total, of course they say it's a total surprise, but I was like, I wasn't getting pregnant for 3 years. So I was kind of like, oh, okay, here we go. um but it was very much like, okay, I'm not going back to a military hospital. There is just too much trauma there. At this point, we're in Missouri now. So
Okay.
they did have military hospitals there, but like, I'm not doing it. I'm not going there. We're not going to a hospital at all. And we started looking for midwifery care. And I found a great midwifery practice in Overland Park, Kansas. And it was night and day sitting in an office talking for an hour with a midwife and going through my history and really learning me as an individual. My kid's there and Robert's there, and we're all just kind of this family, and it really solidified that we needed to be there. I did start looking for doulas during my pregnancy, but I just wasn't meshing well with people. And so I really honed in on of instinct wise, if I'm not meshing with you, then I really don't want you in my space. Um, which I really lean on now when interviewing with families of like, if you don't click with your doula right away, you're not going to click with them later. So
Absolutely.
I'm like, please interview as many doulas as possible before you choose who's in your space. Um, but the care there, we went over like nutrition, we went over hormones. I ate completely different than I did with my first two pregnancies, and worked out and did walks and like really transformed what I did in my pregnancy and what I did um, to stay healthy. Now I say that, but I also had how do you pronounce is it hyperemesis?
Yeah, hyperemesis.
Yep,
Yep.
yep. So we were in and out of the hospital all the time. We had home health care and IV bags and all the fun, wonderful Zofran pumps and things. So even though I tried doing all this stuff, I remember having to bring our mattress downstairs because I was so exhausted and so weak that I would just lay in the mattress and watch the kids play in their little play area, and I'm like, "Okay, we're sleeping down here, and that's all we can do right now because there's nothing else I can do without getting up and, like, puking my guts out." I was very much over it, but, it got me out of cooking because Robert would come home and then cook. Just something about raw meat, I just could not do it whole pregnancy. So it was fun. It was fun just, like, dealing with all the IVs and all the stuff, but,
Did that last for the entire pregnancy?
it went to at least the 3rd trimester, because the
Yeah.
3rd trimester was, like, a breeze. Once I went through the 1st, the 2nd, I'm like, "This cannot be the whole pregnancy, like, there's just no way." And around the beginning of that 3rd trimester, as I finally, like, seen the light, and I was able to get up and move and do things, and, um I was so glad that they had each other and they were so close in age because I was not an active participant in a lot of activities. It was very much, on Robert's, shoulders, which I'm like, "Payback because you were gone this 2nd time."
I've seen too that that's when parents get the most creative of like, "Okay, mommy's the mountain, we're gonna drive the cars over the mountain," all
Yeah,
of those things.
exactly. And so leading up to her birth, it was very peaceful. It was very just serene and very beautiful. I have pretty quick labors. I think with Bella, she was a good, 8 to 10 hours. Desiree was 6 and then I or no 5. And then Liz was very fast. I remember going in for my 39-week appointment and or no, I'm sorry. My first 2 were 39 weeks. Liz waited until it was 42 weeks. And I remember going into my appointment and the photo that I took, oh my God, the swelling in my face and my nose spread and everything. I'm like, okay, well, the nose spreading is real.
The pregnancy phase.
That's the pregnancy face and nose and ugh. Um, we went to Red Robin after. And I remember standing up in the aisle and having to like labor back and forth and rocking them like, okay, let's hurry up and eat your food. And my parents, funny enough, the 3rd time they came and it was cutting it really close because I did not want them in my space giving birth. And that's very on par for what they would want. They would want to be there. And so I really wanted to be able to transition and they were coming. It was that night. It was coming the next day, and I was like, "This baby's freaking coming." So I'm laboring, we go to Walmart, we walk around, we do all the things. We finally get home around, I wanna say, I don't know, 9:30, get the kids to bed. I call my neighbor, I sit on the yoga ball, and I stand right back up. I'm like, "Nope, we're going." And he's like, "Really?" And he's like, "I just sat down." I'm like, "We're going." He's like, "Okay." Um, we get to the birth center and I'm 7 centimeters and she's like, "Let's start the tub." And I'm like, "Cool." I'm still kind of like not, I'm in shock that this is even happening. It's also so bizarre to me how in my body I was and like aware of everything. Um, but what what really shocked me was not being able to voice and articulate what I needed.
Mhm.
Which a lot of people are like, "No, I'll be able to do that, and I'll be able to do this." And I'm like, "No, no, 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 you won't be able to." It's so hard to really voice in that moment when you're in your labor space, you're in labor land, to be like, "I don't want this, I don't want that, I want this." Like, you need that other person to really help lead that. Otherwise, I don't believe you're really truly in your labor land. Like, you're in this limbo of fight or flight and you can't really get truly into your labor land is how I think of it. But we can circle back on that. And they start the tub. I get in the tub and they're like, it's gonna go pretty quickly. I'm like, yeah, probably. And poor Robert. sat on the edge of the tub and I cursed all the gods because that back labor was back. And this wonderful student at the time before I got in the tub was giving me hip squeezes, but I did not realize how amazing a hip squeeze felt. And when I got in the tub, it's against the wall, so no one could get behind me. And so the whole time I had a contraction, I would just bite his arm. And I had his hand and I just bit up and down his arm as much as I could. Again, I think just payback for everything. So I want to say I was maybe in there an hour and they're like, why don't you get out of the tub, go to the bathroom, see what happens, see if you can empty your bladder a little bit. Cool, no problem. Now, the knowledge that I know is that movement of opening your hips and getting out of the tub and sitting on the toilet. Of course, that's what brought your baby.
Right.
So I remember sitting down and being like, "Oh, she's coming." So I have these two midwives under to grab me under my arms, bring me to the bed, and she's already making her way. And it was just so beautiful. Like I was not screaming, I was not vocal. I was just kind of laying there smiling and she's crowning. They're like, "You're just letting her sit there." And I'm like, "Yeah, we're good." I'm like, "It's fine." And she ended up coming out and straight to my chest. And I just remember over and over saying that I did it. And I'll never forget like that feeling, that huge empowerment feeling and how different it was. I was aware, I was conscious, I knew everything that was happening. I felt all the sensations. I felt my water breaking for the first time. I felt her coming through. I felt her on my chest, all the things that made such a huge difference that I didn't get those first two times. Um, but I also won't forget not being able to tell the two students to shut up because they were like whispering. And I could not, for the life of me, speak the words of, "Can you please be quiet?" Or "Can you please, talk in the hallway?" And that's what I'm like, even Robert, he goes, I wish I would have told him, but I was so focused on you that I couldn't say it either. And now we laugh about it even now, or of like, I wish they would just be quiet. And so it's funny what you remember very distinctly in your births as well, of like, what is that thing that's going to stick with them? And as a doula, and it's also something that I think about a lot of like, what am I going to do or say that's going to stick with them for the rest of their life? Because we all know that these birth stories that we have, they follow us our whole lives. And what are they going to remember me by? So that's something that
Yes.
I think about a lot.
Oh, what a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful story. I don't know another word for it. Just the opportunity for you to be present
Mhm.
is such a gift.
Mhm.
The opportunity for all of us to be present with our children from the moment they come out
Yeah.
is a gift, and we don't actually all get that chance. And so that is just an amazing redemption. I could and I want to do a whole podcast on the intention that we hold and how when we speak, we have such power with our words because, like you said, it does stick with people for the rest of their lives. And it can be so random,
Yes.
the words that we hold on to and the things that we remember. So, all the more reason to be intentional with our words as we're holding space
Yeah.
for birth. Wow, Cynthia, that's
Detrimental.
amazing.
Yeah. I cherish all their birth stories. And I feel like it definitely led me to be a doula,
Yeah.
and it led me to want to be a midwife, and then also Postpartum Support International because I was terrified to feel the same way I did with my second.
Yes.
And I think it helped having that my parents were there, my sister stayed with us for a few weeks and helped. And I had people bringing us meals, and it was very, very different. So different, setting myself up for success uh, to not feel that way again.
Yeah.
And again, it plays a huge factor in how I even do my prenatal visits with clients. Well, what are we doing postpartum? A lot of what I teach in my postpartum class is what that looks like. And then also the partner aspect, because I don't think we talk enough about that in general. What happens to our relationship and what happens with our children, and how do we come out of this fog after 3 or 4 months? Um, and are you thriving or are you just surviving? And,
Yeah.
all of that. So
It's
I
the
know those are all
ultimate.
topics.
No, it's awesome to talk about. It's the ultimate stress test for a relationship, for a family altogether. So with the fact that, I mean, you had support systems available to you, but you also had to say yes to them.
Yeah.
So, what pieces of that were premeditated? I'm thinking about our listeners who are like, okay, I definitely don't want that to happen. And maybe they have some different options of how to set themselves up for the best. I say stack the deck in their favor so that
Mhm.
they can have a really great or at least a neutral postpartum experience during that stress test. What are the things that you put in place ahead of time, knowing what your previous experience was?
Yeah. I think it's very important to know that we can't control the outcome. And
Mhm.
so, what are some things that you can control? You can control that you have to eat every day. You have to control that you have to entertain your toddlers every day. You have to sleep. And those are the things that you need to control. And so setting up food, we did meal prepping. I found a great blog back in 2015 that had 30 postpartum meals, and she went through all of the crock pot dump meals that were really popular, and we stocked up on, all of that and got meals ready. We had friends that lived on the same street as us, and they would cook us meals and bring it over, and just really honed in on, I don't want to spend time with you guys, but could you drop off food? We also had kids the same age, so can you please take the girls for a couple hours, and while me and Robert sleep? And that really helped, knowing when to ask for help and not feeling guilty about it. Because a lot of that is the mom guilt of, I should be able to do it all, and now I'm leaning on other people to help take care of my kids, which are just unrealistic expectations. And when you have unrealistic expectations of yourself, that's when you kind of go down that rabbit hole, and you don't support yourself enough.
Right.
Um, Went through a plan with Robert of, like, where are we setting up our feeding station, and where are we setting up the bed, and who's getting up when, and what does that look like? What's your role? Which is so important to talk about those expectations early on. That way, I feel like if you can just lay it out, even if it's like common sense for you, lay it out, because what's common sense for you may not be for the other person, and vice versa.
Preach. Oh, I think we need just that to be a clip. Just because it's common sense for you
Yes.
as a mother with your instincts does
Yes.
not mean
Yep.
that it's common sense for your partner.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, some things you just need to hear. That was really good timing, Cynthia. Um,
It comes to us when we need it.
yes.
So I think that also very much helped. And it's hard. Like, Desiree was a winter baby, Liz is a winter baby. They were both born in January. So knowing right away that I needed to get out of my bubble. But like, I remember all of her postpartum. And I think even now, it still is just like so heartbreaking to see the differences between not remembering those first 3 to 4 months, and then being able to talk through, "I remember when this happened, I remember when that happened, I remember when this happened with Liz," and, um, And it really shows how unsupported I was and how not ready I was and how I was failed in the hospital um, and the lack of support. And I think that's the part that sticks with you the most. Now, in my midwifery role, like reading studies and learning cases and seeing how that plays out with your risk factors and your birth trauma and your postpartum, how that affects your relationship with your child and the bonding that you have and their personality. And so because then I went through this whole cycle of grief of, man, I did that to you. Not on purpose, but you know, darn, I'm so sorry that now you will have some after effects of that because of the experience that I had.
Is So I do have a question for you.
Yeah.
If we have listeners who are thinking about this, wanting to set themselves up for success, you've talked a little bit about how you did that the
Mhm.
third time around. So the meal trains, having really blunt conversations with your partner, like straightforward. I even think about in the postpartum class that you teach how there's literally a picture of a clock and
Mhm.
you mark on it, okay, if the baby wakes up this hour, this hour, this hour,
Yeah.
how are we going to function? Who is waking up? How
Yeah.
am I getting my 4 hour stretch of sleep? How are
Yeah.
you getting your 4 hour stretch of sleep? And then how do we get everything else done? What do we
Yeah.
delegate? It's those conversations. So I feel like we've touched on that. If someone feels after they've had their baby, even if it's not such a deep, dark hole where like you sort of know that something is off, but if they're just feeling like, maybe something isn't quite right.
Mhm.
We know that there's about a 2 week period after you have your baby where there can be postpartum blues, as they call it, because there are these major shifts in hormones, and then a lot of it lifts after that. So it is very normal to be emotional and have these mood swings the first couple of weeks. So I know as doulas, we say that like if that's not lifting after about 2 weeks, to maybe explore with a therapist. But if there's somebody out there, whether it's that or at any other time, maybe it's 9 months after the birth, maybe it's a year. If something just feels off, what advice would you give them?
Yeah. I think to circle back to what you said, the first 2 weeks, it's actually the first 10 days for postpartum
Yeah.
baby blues. And I think that shocked me the most of learning like baby blues shouldn't last more than 7 to 10 days. And usually after that, if it's continuing, then there's a little bit more there that we need to kind of hone in on and see what exactly is going on. Sometimes, like you mentioned before, it is just sleep. It is just like you need a night's rest and a long 4 to 6 hour nap and you're solid. But I think Postpartum Support International is phenomenal resource. It is free and it is women and birthing persons and future moms and parents that are all over this world that are coming together and finding support. And there are weekly meetings that are virtual. If you wanted to be in that space with other people, it depends on your personality. It could be hit or miss. They also have they're not case managers. They're like literally your person that you can just text and call and talk through things and kind of navigate what you're feeling. Is this just something situational where, hey, let's talk about postpartum? What are you doing to help yourself right now? Could you have family over? Could you hire a babysitter? Can you hire a postpartum doula? Where are things that they can kind of help navigate you in your area where you live to make things a little bit easier? Or is it something more where you need a therapist? Do you need medication? What questions should you ask your provider? So they go through all this information with them. I think it's important to really hone in that they're not alone. And I think
Yeah.
that's the biggest thing is that moms think they're alone or they feel guilty or sometimes we lie and we say it wasn't as bad as it was, or no, I didn't feel that way. And it was baby slept all the time. But I think when we quit making these topics taboo and we quit not allowing partners in this conversation, will we see a lot more success when it comes to our moms and the families. And I think that's the other thing is if you feel like you're having signs and symptoms, the best thing you can do is surround yourself with other individuals, with other people that are going through the same thing you are. It sucks and it's leading up to that. Like, okay, I gotta get out of the house with a toddler and a newborn and I gotta lug the car seat and it feels like more of an issue. But, if you can just keep practicing that every day and actually get out of your home, it makes a huge difference. And the other thing that we talk about is those non-negotiables being doing something for yourself every single day that is gonna fill your cup up. Um, I always say it's not really a good expectation to have that your partner is gonna be filling up your cup for you, or you're gonna be filling up theirs because you guys are both in this you're in survival mode. So, what are the things that you can do? And it does not include you just taking a shower and eating food, unless you're doing your weekly everything shower that we talk about. It can't just be your basic necessities. It has to be something that's gonna fill your soul and make you happy and kinda just, like, drop your shoulders and release that tension that you've been having all day. And that really trips up a lot of people, whether like, what is gonna fill my soul today that
Yeah.
can make me feel good and take on the rest of the day?
Yeah. And
Mm.
for some people, I've found that like maybe they're not even there yet. Maybe it is like, first, let's tackle the basic necessities. Like, why are we asking our partners if we can take a shower? Like, no, I need to take a shower. Can you watch the baby for this amount of time or whatever? It's and it's having a shower however many days. Like that can be literally in your postpartum plan and it
Mhm.
sounds stupid.
Yeah.
Really, it sounds like, no, I can handle this. It's
Mhm.
okay.
Mhm.
But when you are in the throes of postpartum depression or anxiety, like it can be overwhelming to simply take a shower
Yes.
daily or every other day, or like how often do you need to wash your hair?
Yeah.
How often um do you need just those things
Mhm.
that if that is the starting point for you, that's okay.
Yeah.
And then how can it be better? To your point, what's going to make you feel like a normal human
Mhm.
again? What are those things that can give you energy to then be able to serve your family again, but not from a place of being completely and utterly drained?
Exactly. Exactly. And
Yeah.
I think that's the hard part, what society tells us as women and mothers that we need to be doing, and what our own mothers are sometimes telling us that we need to be doing. And when we sit back and look at our families that are our own, how are you wanting to be a mom? And how are you wanting to be a wife and a partner and a person? And I think a lot of times too, which this is new verbiage that I have been sharing, is don't become an expert of your newborn. Because if you become an expert of your newborn, no one else can. And no one is going to put your baby to sleep the same way you do. No one's going to swaddle them the same, feed them the same. And so you put all of this pressure on yourself of you have to do everything now and you feel like no one is helping you. It's because you're an expert now of that baby. And so how can you expect anybody else to step in and support you when you don't do it right? Because you're that expert. I have this recent mom that one of her non-negotiables was taking a bath every day, and let me tell you, seeing her in the bath photos every day is, like, so amazing. And so you gotta find what works for you. You really do, and not to compare your postpartum with anybody else. Social media looks very pretty from the outside, but in the reality, there could be other things going on, which I think is really important.
Yeah. That's so, so important. And so before we end, I just wanted to go back a little bit and touch specifically on Postpartum Support International, because something that's on my heart to share is that a lot of these feelings that we have sometimes in the postpartum timeframe. Like we've already said it, but it can be really hard to share with someone, and there can be a lot of fear there. Like, oh, I must be the only one having this thought, or there's something wrong with me. And so there's shame and fear in sharing that sometimes. But actually, when we are able to share in the right space, that's when we get the best support. And so, yes, it might be not a great idea to go and share with any random doctor or whoever is there in clinic rotation that day. Like that might not be the best place to share. And I know a lot of people, like you said, who have lied on their Edinburgh test. So the test that they give you at 6 weeks postpartum, it's a 10, I think 10 questions or something like that, something short that gives you a rating. And if you hit a certain number, then okay, you have postpartum depression, or you're at risk for postpartum depression. And then at that point, it's like, okay, what are you going to do? Are you going to take away my baby? Like that is a huge, huge fear for a lot of these women. And so the reason I love Postpartum Support International so much is that they have very specific training. They understand the brain. They understand what's happening, and they are truly there with women to support. And there's a whole network, if we haven't mentioned this already, there's a whole network of therapists and counselors who have this specific credential, who have the training to be speaking with moms and dads too, who are like, what's happening? Like I see it as almost borrowing somebody else's brain. If your brain is in the thick of parenting a newborn, like you can borrow someone else's brain and say, okay, how can I be fully resourced today? Whether that's something simple or whether that is talking to a professional. And they have a 1-800 number to call as well if anybody is feeling like they need someone urgently. So we will definitely link all of that in the show notes. And again, Cynthia, I just want to really, really commend you for coming on and being so vulnerable with your experience, because I think it's going to really help a lot of people both recover from and prepare for the possibility of what things might look like postpartum.
Yeah.
So I do need to ask you one more question. Ask everybody at the end of my podcast, and that is, if you could offer one piece of wisdom to transform the fear and trauma in today's birth culture into confidence, healing, and triumph, what would it be?
Good question, Amy.
I know.
I think the biggest aspect is use your voice. Use your voice. I still have this imposter syndrome of who am I to even be talking with you on a podcast right now? And a lot of women feel that way of their experiences, of their birth, of their postpartum, of their pregnancy. And so they stay quiet. And history will show it does nothing for you to stay quiet. So use your voice, share your wisdom, share your story, and know that you are making a difference in everyone's life. Use your voice in all aspects, whether it's in making sure you get informed consent, whether it's sharing your story or saying no, use your voice.
Beautiful. Thank you so much.
Thank you for being such a safe space too for this. I appreciate it.